Well, we're excited to see the readout from that phase 3 trial when that trial has closed. So we have one more speaker, and Carla Schad from Praxis, and unfortunately she had a health issue right before the summit started, so she is going to be joining us on Zoom, I hope.
I think I'm here.
Fantastic. Hello, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Charlene. And I'm assuming the slides will be loaded on your side. Can you hear me? Charlene?
I'm back.
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can run the slides. Just tell me
Okay.
when to go forward.
Yeah, just go forward, Charlene. And while that's coming up, I'll make an introduction. I'm Carla Schad, and I apologize for not being there. By the short haircut, you might tell that I'm finishing up cancer treatment. I've had a little issue with my white count, so I know a lot of you probably have been part of this where there's probably not the best time to get on the airplane. So I apologize. I love Charlene to death. I love this organization. So me personally, I'm very disappointed for not being there. A little bit about my background. I'm a child neurologist and I'm the senior director now at Praxis. I've been here for a whopping 6 weeks. I've been in industry for over 20 years and in the DEE space for the last 10. And I have a very significant dedication with this. I grew to know Charlene as I worked with Zogenix and we developed fenfluramine and have been very enamored with your organization and wanting to be part of a company in drug development that can potentially help your children. So with that, the legality of it all, yeah, I'm an employee of Praxis and I own stock and whatnot. Just as with anything, relutrigine is important for you all to know. It's a drug that I'll be speaking about, but it's still an investigational drug, and it has not been approved by any regulatory body, including the FDA. So any of this information is both for scientific and educational purposes, and it's not to promote its use or unapproved use. With that, I know we're getting toward the end of the day. I have given Charlene both my cell phone number as well as my email address. Charlene will tell you that I'm very open to anyone, anytime to reach out to me. So if there's no time for questions at the end, just know that's available. And also know that my dedication to you is there. So I do not care when you reach out, happy to answer any questions if I have the answers. And if not, I will find the answers. So Praxis is something that's very interesting for me. People ask me, why did I come to this company? On the outside, you may or may not have heard of Praxis because this is not a very well-known company within the epilepsy space, both with the physicians as well as the healthcare providers. But this is a company, I wish I could speak to you more detail about it, but really what got my interest to want to come here is the dedication of this company, not only to the epilepsy space, but the broader CNS space. But on my side of the world is the one that's leading the epilepsies, their dedication not only to epilepsy as a whole, but the DEEs, and in particular, the pediatric perspective. This is a company, at least with relutrigine, whenever it was first being developed, it was earmarked for the development for children. As you know, a lot of the anti-seizure medications that are out there were developed for adults, and then children came second. This is a drug that I'm very proud to say, as both a pediatrician and child neurologist, that was initially created for children. So this is our platform. You may have heard of this. We have both what is called the Cerebrum platform and the Solidus platform. The Cerebrum platform is what I call the small molecule platform. So we have this elixacatamide that is on the CNS space of Praxis. This is for essential tremor. But what's important for me is the side where we are dedicated to the epilepsy side. So we have vermortigine that is in development for both what I call the bread and butter epilepsies, or the more common epilepsies, the focal onset seizures, generalized seizures, that is in development. But relutrigine in and of itself is the one that is furthest along with regards to our pipeline. It's currently under FDA review for both the DEEs of SEN2A and 8A. Finishing the trials with that, like I said, is under FDA review for priority review. The PDUFA date or the approval date is expected on or before December 27th of this year. And then as I will be speaking both to the trial in some regard, as well as most importantly, the Emerald that will be with regards to specifically to the DEE space, it is currently enrolling. We also have other drugs in development for KCNT1, as well as in the further space on the general CNS side of movement disorders. We also, and you've heard talks about, wonderful talks actually, about the ASOs and what they are. If you notice here, we have a number of ASOs in development for this, many of the DEEs out there, anywhere from the gapmer aspect, splice switching, as well as another ASO that I don't even know what the mechanism of action is with that. So either these are focusing on, as was mentioned in the previous talk, either on the gain of function of the gene or the loss of function of the gene, depending on what we're looking at. So with regards to relutrigine is what we call a sodium channel modulator. And I'm quite sure some of the physicians in the room, like Dr. Marsh, as well as some of you parents, have heard what are called sodium channel blockers. Well, relutrigine is a sodium channel modulator, which is different, where it really has its prioritization of mechanism of action is being super selective for the hyperactive sodium channels. And we all know, as mentioned in the previous talk, what drives epilepsy is the imbalance of the excitability versus an inhibition of our neuronal activities. So relutrigine really targets the hyperactivity of that. So with regards to relutrigine, the clinical profile with regards to the 2A and 8A studies has shown really significant efficacy. And what's important about this, you always hear about the placebo arm in epilepsy trials. The thing that I think is important to remember, especially in these DEE studies, where these children are highly refractory to treatment, the placebo arm is really the standard of care. It's the medication that they're already onto. So relutrigine is either added to or not added to, which is the placebo arm, a regimen that's already there. So we saw both the improvement with regards to the number of motor seizures compared to placebo, as well as seizure-free days. What's important about this is it's a very well-tolerated molecule. Probably for some of you that have had children on sodium channel blockers, I know Dr. Marsh has had issues with this. One of the big rate-limiting steps with a typical sodium channel blocker is the tolerability. What's nice about relutrigine that this is really sort of targeting those aberrant neurons or those sick neurons in epilepsy. It's really leaving the normal neurons alone. So by that default, we're having well tolerability. You're not seeing the typical sodium channel blocker side effects, which include dizziness, sedation, some of the GI tolerability. So this is a wonderful aspect of this molecule, because often a typical sodium channel blocker is limited in its titration based off of those side effects. So often many children cannot get to a truly efficacious dose because the clinician is battling the side effects. So as I mentioned, we've got the 2A and 8A studies done. It's currently under regulatory review for approval. We're hoping by December 27th of this year because of the studies being both very positive. What's nice about this has priority review. Also, as I mentioned earlier, as this is being a drug that was developed primarily for children, and please keep in mind, just because it was developed for children, it also, based off of our age range in our studies, also is highly efficacious in our older children and adult population. But we did also have the preferential pediatric disease designation with it, which is very unique. As I mentioned, this is something, obviously this is a efficacious medication, meaning that it works and that it works on top of other medications. So in these children where they're still having multiple seizures, this drug coming in will actually have benefit on top of that. But what is nice about this, is how tolerable it is. But there's something here that with you in this room that I think that will intrigue you is the ease of use. Not only do you have efficacy, you have tolerability, but this is a drug that's easy for both the clinician and most importantly, you, the family, and for the child to take. There's no titration required. It's only required to be taken once a day. It comes in a liquid formulation that can be either administered orally or by G-tube, and it's ketogenic diet friendly. So as I mentioned, this was a drug specifically designed in the initiation for pediatrics in mind. So the EMBOLD studies were, and you've seen this all day with regards to study designs. EMBOLD was the study, the phase 3 study that we did for both the 2A and 8A patients together. So as you've seen and over today, and today, whenever Dr. Marsh went over trial designs and sort of the developmental path, it was an impeccable presentation. So I won't go into great detail, but essentially what we have to do is one, find the patients that are eligible both by inclusion and exclusion criteria. Once those are identified, they are screened to see for that eligibility. The screening involves some lab testing, some background testing like EKGs, and also the screening involves to make sure, and I know this sounds odd, but we have to be able to test whether or not the drug is efficacious, is to see if the patient is having enough seizures in that baseline screening period to see if we can actually see a difference during the treatment phase. So once they get out of that screening phase, they come into the 16-week treatment period. Often that you will see with epilepsy trials that you'll have a 2-week titration phase, but as I mentioned before, this is a drug that doesn't require titration. So at the end of that 16 weeks is where we look at both the primary endpoints, which is the change in motor seizure frequency compared to placebo, as well as the secondary endpoints. And that's what the FDA essentially is evaluating now, as well as these patients going into a 48-week open label extension. And as you think about it, and if you've been in clinical trials, that open label extension is more like the real world of epilepsy management, where your providers can actually have some little bit of flexibility with some background medications and how they're managing the care of the patient. I think it's important to highlight out here where I think that I'm proud of Praxis as a clinician and as somebody that's been in industry for 20 years, recognizing that our DEE children, it's not often an easy feat to get to a clinical trial site, even if it's in your backyard, to load up, go to a hospital, be evaluated, every 4 weeks. So we are a company that with a 2A, 8A study, as well as the Emerald study, which I'll mention here in a second, decentralized that, which means that not only did we have the ability for patients to be seen in-house or at the centers with our investigators in the United States as well as ex-US, there are also the ability for clinicians from the trial to come into the homes of the families to evaluate the patients with regards to the trial. So it made it so much easier for the family. So I just wanted to highlight that with you because that's something that very grateful to the FDA and also for a company like Praxis as to being very dedicated and thinking outside the box in order to help the families of these children. So next slide, please. This is something related to the EMBOLD study with regards to the cohort 1. Cohort 1, it was essentially a phase 2 aspect where there were only 16 patients. And what's important about here is in that cohort 1, there was a 40% decrease of seizures in that patient population. And keeping in mind that was against placebo, but that placebo is the standard of care. What is nice about this slide, and just use this as a representation because this truly doesn't represent all of the results because that will be a secondary evaluation. This is whenever this slide was made. This is essentially where a staggered entry for patients coming into this. But just notice that not only do you see, the efficacy after the 16 weeks, not only do you have that, what it seems to be until we look at the secondary evaluation once the patients are all in open label and completed, that there is a trend for not only do they maintain that efficacy, they also continue to improve upon that efficacy as they remain on therapy. And again, during that cohort 1, the adverse events remain very similar to absolutely very mild in all formats. Cohort 2 is more of what you consider to be the standard phase 3, and there was approximately 28 patients in one arm versus 25 in the other. Again, what is important here is to looking at the trends for the open label extension. Not only do you have that immediate benefit of about 53% reduction in motor convulsive seizures compared to placebo, but then you see that trending over time, which again, that will be some data to follow, that these patients are continued to be improved over a greater period of time, and then maybe potentially even improving greater as the time goes on. And what's important, and you all know too, as families, it's not just the percent number in reduction, it's also those seizure-free days that you have. And that can be a lifetime of change for families, where, rather than having seizures every single day, you may have them, every other day, you may go a week. We don't have that data specifically about, 1 to 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, at least at this point in time. But we do have the knowledge that there's at least a 66% increase in motor seizure-free days with regards to that 2A and 8A study. So that leads us into the safety aspect here. Next slide, please.
And Carla, I'm just going to jump in and say that we just have 2 or 3 more minutes.
Okay, really quickly. So this is something with the caregiver impression of change, as well as the physician perspective. This is something that not only are we looking at, as all companies are looking at, is the overall aspect. How is the patient doing outside of the seizures? And you can see the trends here that we've got identified. Not only are we seeing trends with regards to alertness, as well as communication. So those are things that will be further followed once we get the final manuscript out later this year. Next slide, please. So again, tolerability here, pretty much if you look at relutrigine compared to placebo, the tolerability is very similar to placebo, and you're not seeing those things that you typically see with sodium channel blockers. Next slide, please. So what has opened it up and what's important for this meeting, being that relutrigine targets the hyperactivity of sodium channels, that is essentially a common denominator in all DEEs. And intuitively, you look at this and go, there's really no reason why relutrigine can't work in all of the subsets of the DEE classification. So that's what opened up the perspective. And this is some of the background with some of the animal models that also substantiated that there were signals. So that's what lent Praxis to the aspect of doing the phase 3 study, or the Emerald study in DEEs, which is currently recruiting. Very similar trial design that we have with regards to the 2A and 8A study. This is actively recruiting, again, a 16-week treatment period. We've got 160 patients divided with the placebo arm, which is the standard of care, as well as active treatment, as well as the open label extension. This is nearing completion, hopefully we will have data very soon, and hopefully at least some readout for the AES meeting. But just know that this will be the next indication that we'll be seeking with the FDA as well, following the approval of 2A, 8A later this year. I think that's about it, Charlene. Let me see what the next slide is here. And so I've already spoke to this with the decentralization. The Emerald study is also decentralized. Doing our best to try to make it easier on the families, and most importantly, easier on the patients for them to get there. So as I mentioned, the next slide, I think it refers to Praxis and some of the contact information. The other aspect, Charlene has both my cell phone number as well as my email address. I want you guys to feel comfortable if you have questions about this drug, or where we are planning to go further, feel free to reach out to me individually. And Charlene, I don't know if there's time or the ability for me to hear any questions, but happy to answer a couple of questions if time permits.
Yeah, thank you so much, Carla. So I think we are going to need to defer questions just given the late hour, but I do have your contact information, and we promise we're not going to promise we're not going to abuse it. So
All right. Abuse it if you need to.
thank
But
you.
thank you.
And now I'm going to pass things